We don't have a hammer today, so we'll flip the mic. Well, there we go. Let's do it for posterity. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of the Budget Review Subcommittee on Transportation. This is our fifth meeting, and at this time we will do the roll call. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Storm, Senator Turner, here. Senator Yates, Representative Branscombe, here. Representative Huff,
here.
Representative McPherson, here. Representative Palumbo, Representative Smith, here. Representative Tackett Lafferty,
present.
Senator Mays Bledsoe, Representative Blanton, here. Co-Chair Higdon,
here.
Chair Upchurch.
We do have a quorum. We're duly constituted to do business today, and I think we've got a very good agenda, talking a lot about aviation. So that's something that I think everyone's got a great interest in. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 20th, 2023 minutes. Do I hear a motion for the approval? Got a motion? Second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. All right. Madisonville Community College. Fixed wing and helicopter training programs. If you all will please proceed to the table. Once you get situated, if you will introduce yourselves for the record, and then you may proceed. You may need to, when you speak in on the microphone, just make sure that the green light is on.
Is that
there
better?
We go. Great.
All righty. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. First, I would like to thank you for making the time to let us come and talk with you for just a few minutes about what we're doing in Western Kentucky at Madisonville Community College to promote aviation in Kentucky. I am here this morning. My name is Cindy Kelly. I serve as the president at Madisonville Community College. And with me, driving the computer bus this morning is Mr. Todd Smith. He's the director of our aviation programs. And I also have Mr. Ray Gillespie, who is our chief financial officer at the college. So we have a couple purposes here today. One is to let you know that we are flying in West Kentucky. We have had 6 years put into starting an aviation program, and we want you to know a little bit about that. And we will be really upfront and just tell you that we hope to be able to make our program more affordable to students. We have looked now after working 6 years on this program, feel that we can do that, and we want to make it self-sustaining. And we actually will show you through request how we can do that. So we will, without further ado, get started. We're ready for the next slide. Just a real quick background about our program. We started this journey in 2017 at the request of our local economic development agencies, our local economic development corporation. In our part of the state, they were looking for a way to bring economic development, a way to basically build a niche for doing something that is needed, that has demand, that is high tech, and that will make the region stand out. So with that, we started doing some exploring. We started doing research. We spent, I will say 3 years, but the research and the development continues. So I will go ahead and say also 6 years of research and development. We visited other aviation programs. We tried to figure out, is this something as a community college we can do for our community? We had local elected officials, our economic development partners, our partners in the aviation world, in the airports, saying, please see if we can do this. We worked with aviation consultants. We did a lot of research. And as a result of that, in 2020, we had the first aviation flight program approved by the KCTCS Board of Regents, and that program included helicopter flight and fixed wing flight. We established a lot of support for these programs as we built them, and it was a village that built these programs. It wasn't just us. Our Economic Development Corporation, again, I mentioned our airports, local foundations and funders helped us as well. And we also worked from the very beginning closely with the Aviation Commissioner's Office to see what we could do to bring these programs into existence. We had our first students in 2021, and from the time that we got the curriculum approved in 2020 until June 2022, we worked to get VA eligibility for veterans and transitioning military to use VA benefits for this program. You know, we're setting on, I won't say the back door, but the side door of Fort Campbell. And one of the things that happened is about the time we started building this program, Austin Peay University in Clarksville, Tennessee, started a rotorcraft program as well. And we had been seeing these 400 plus transitioning soldiers, you know, turning right and going into Tennessee. And we wanted to give them another reason to turn left and come into Kentucky. So we were very pleased to have that eligibility, and we take that very seriously. And then that gets us up to today, where we have over 50 students who are in our program learning to fly. So that's just a little bit of the background of the program. Our next slide talks about our commitment to the program. And our commitment is to our students and to our community, and that is why we took this on. And it has been a learning curve, and it's been a heavy lift. But our communities wanted it. We have students who were interested. So our commitment is with effort and with the building of the program. But what we want to show you is our commitment is also monetary. The slide that you see in front of you talks about our investment to date. And when I say to date, that was at the end of last fiscal year. So we have a little more of a commitment, monetary commitment into it right now. But we're well above $6.5 million committed to this program. So just a snapshot of our enrollment. I was told when I started this journey with all the aviation folks, if you build it, we really do believe they will come. Well, we started with those 3 students in 2021, and 4 semesters later, we're over 50 students in. And they are wonderful students. We have wonderful flight instructors. What has happened, however, Todd came to me this fall and he said, I can't take any more students. Don't have enough equipment, and we can't get all the flight hours in. So we've actually had to say right now we're not taking more students. Now we'll be able to bring a few more in next semester, but we are right at that level. Our program is designed to be a flexible program that will meet the needs of the students we serve. You know, we are a community college. We have students who might be able to be with us for a couple semesters and they want to continue, but life happens. And so they have to back away for a minute. And that's okay. They can come back into this aviation program. Another demographic are our veterans and our transitioning military. We have the program built so that folks who are flying in the military get a lot of credit as they come into the program, so we can help them move along quickly. So we're proud of that. We are very proud, point of pride, and you can see it. We have it bolded as our last comment on this slide. Our current first attempt pass rate on practical evaluations is over 92%. And that means students save money because every time we bring an FAA certified evaluator in, if they fail, they have to pay for the next one. And that's upwards to $1,200, $1,500. And they're passing first time, and we're very, very pleased with that. Now, growing our enrollment. We need to grow our enrollment, but the students are what we have in our minds. We want to grow enrollment, but we are leasing all of our aircraft at this point in time, and that just makes it more expensive. And we have a chart here that you can see. Right now, it costs us to lease our fixed wing assets $281 per flight hour, because we're paying overhead for those leasing companies. If we are able to purchase our own assets, we will cut that cost to about $140 to $145 per flight hour. So you can see the difference. If for the 250 hours required for the fixed wing, it would go from $70,000 our cost to $35,000 our cost. And those are savings we can push to our students, and we really want to. We can make this so much more affordable for our students if we are able to own aircraft. And you can see the same example there with our rotorcraft. Helicopters are much more expensive to keep and to fly. So that is how we think we can continue to grow enrollment. Even though we haven't had trouble now, we want to make this something that is available and affordable to more students in the Commonwealth. So what we have done is we had a 3-year plan, and we've made it a 2-year plan because of the growth that we have seen and the interest we see in our program. So we believe that with assistance, we can build a fleet over the next couple years. And if we can get assistance with building that fleet, taking care of the fixed costs associated with that fleet for a couple years, then we believe we can make this, we know we can make it much more affordable for students, but we believe we can make it a self-sustaining program as well. And when we set pen to paper and did the math, we're looking at being able to obtain 6 airplanes, 6 helicopters, and other costs, and we're looking at about $10 million. So we want to put that out there. We're looking for support for that. But what I want to leave you with today is just a couple points that we believe that makes us different. First of all, we're the only associate degree level program in the state for fixed and rotorcraft flight. We have students who are receiving all the same certifications as they would in any other program. We're just condensing it into 2 years. Our program will allow these students to move more quickly into the workforce. We know it's a high wage, high demand position and job right now. There are jobs in all sorts of areas, everything from agricultural flight to piloting private aircraft to commercial flight. And we do have the only collegiate helicopter program in the state. We right now are serving students from Western Kentucky, Western Tennessee, Indiana, and Ohio, and I expect that to grow. And we have very close partnerships with both our airports, Muhlenberg County Airport and Madisonville Regional Airport. In fact, we are just getting ready to complete a hangar at Madisonville Regional Airport, and it's a beautiful hangar, and we'll have space to have our assets when that is finished here very, very soon. We're looking to do the same in Muhlenberg County. We are already working with high schools. We've been approached. Can you help us build a STEM program in aviation? Get these students in through dual credit programming while they are still in high school, so they can move right into it. We have worked hard to build a transition path for military. We are close to Fort Campbell. What we want to do is assist any veteran or transitioning military that's interested in coming into flight. We're proud that we have for flight programs, have a high percentage of female students. We're at 15% right now. We have very high-tech simulators that we're using that the FAA recognizes for flight hours. We also are delivering all of our instruction in technically advanced aircraft that look like that. Well, okay, I'm going to use Todd. I'm taking these words from Todd. It's a Garmin glass cockpit, which is what students will see when they start flying commercially. In many programs, they're in those types of cockpits only for a short amount of time to get them ready for it. Our students do all their training in that type of a cockpit. And the last point I want to make is that our program is strong not only because of what we've done, but because of our communities. We have had community foundations help us invest in simulators. We have had a community foundation invest in endowing a scholarship for us being able to help fixed wing and rotorcraft students. We have 2 airports that stand, I won't say they stand behind us, they stand beside us in building this program. It is a community engaged effort, and we are always very thankful for that. We are preparing students for high wage, high demand careers, and we can do that in 2 years, and then we can also give them flight experience as becoming certified flight instructors for us and helping us continue to build the program. So with support, we believe we can build the infrastructure, continue to develop our infrastructure that we need, lower the cost of students, and meet needs of our Commonwealth. And with that, we want to say thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time. And if you have any questions, I'll let Ray and Todd answer them. How's that?
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. You're just basically getting started. You've got the 50-plus students. Mm-hmm. What have you had any success rate once they degree, getting into the workforce? What's the success rate that you have there?
Our first full 2-year associate degree students will be graduating this spring. Okay. But I will tell you that we could do anecdotal stories for you. We had one of our students this summer went out and made really, really good money in Oregon. He flew turbine helicopters to keep the cherry groves dry. Made really good money. He came back. He's finishing up the program. So we have students doing that as they go along. But our first full 2-year students will be graduating this spring.
Our military transitions.
Oh, we do. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead and talk about the military transitions.
The second part of that, the answer to that question is we have a number of vets that have come through and transitioned either from rotorcraft over to airplanes or have completed their instructor certifications that are now working out there in the industry and even working for us as flight instructors.
All right. Representative McPherson.
Yes, thank you for all you're doing. I have a nephew that started out in high school and went to EKU and received his degree in doing this, and now is a flight instructor and working toward getting his enough hours to be a commercial, and he flies people all over the United States now and does well with it. My question would be to you, do y'all have any kind of math or seeing what a job like this brings back to the community, kind of the ROI of a job in this magnitude, what it would bring back?
Well, there's a couple of things that the economic development folks brought to us when they first brought the idea. One was, if we can start a flight training program and get people in here for 2 or 3 years, even if it's 2 or 3 years, they're adding to our economy, and hopefully we can have them stay. I mean, that's one thing. Another thing that they talked about, and actually we're starting to see already, is we hope by building this program, having this training, we can attract other companies, whether it's a company that just needs a space to be able to get in and out and have those services, or actual companies that are related to flight maintenance or those types of things. And actually a couple companies have already been in contact because of what they're seeing at our airports to do that type of thing. So those were two big things. And we hope that we can get some students starting small businesses, whether if it's private piloting, agricultural piloting, and we've already had a couple students talking about that as well. So we admit we're young in this, but just in the past, again, this isn't a 2-year thing. We're years out in the planning and the research, but we're at a point where we go, if we grow this, we need to find some support, and then we can take off and run with it.
Thank you for what
Did
you're
that
doing.
answer your question?
Yes. I think
Okay.
it's a really good thing. I appreciate it. I think it's a thing of the future, so I appreciate it.
Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Curious on, you have several out-of-state students. Is there a difference in the tuition? You charge more for out-of-state than you do for in-state students?
We do. Not on the flight hours. What you see, in here are the flight hours. Tuition for a student who is in-state, it would be about, and I'm saying about, $3,000 a semester. We have reciprocatory agreements with Indiana, with some other areas where they still can come in at in-state tuition. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that's correct. And it's going to be about 1.5 times the cost for an in-state student unless we have that reciprocity agreement, and then it would reduce that cost.
Okay.
But again, that is not on the flight hours.
When you talk about flight hours, what is their cost per hour for flight time?
Right now, it is, let me get back to that. Right now, for fixed wing, it's $281 a flight hour. And for rotor, it is $531 a flight hour.
That's for the students. They
Yes,
pay
ma'am.
that.
Yes,
they
sir.
pay that amount. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just really a comment for you on your needs. The agriculture, you mentioned it, maybe as sprayers. I know Western Kentucky is a large area for agriculture. One of the things I'd recommend is through federal to look at agricultural grants. There's typically you'll find a lot more friendly conversations up here if you can find a federal grant and just need matching. So that's one area that I would look at for your helicopters. I think they would be definitely interested if it's going to, you may want to check with EDA, federal EDA and federal agriculture. Those funds through a lot of pots they've put together here in the last few years on getting people back to work. You may find some avenues there for some funding, but I just want to throw that out. I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's great that our community colleges are getting, we just are fixing to start a diesel mechanic school in Knox County. And one of the reasons is there was a strong need. The first one to reach out to us was a local sales of the big trucks, and Martin Peterbilt. They called me and asked me, said, I heard you was doing a diesel mechanic school, and I said, yeah, we're about ready to get it cranked up. And he said, well, let me know what I can do to help on the funding, and I'll hire everybody that comes out of there. And I think they got like 5 locations in a couple of states. So there's a big demand, and I think you'll find that in your program, that there'll be find the demand and then go after the funding. And again, I think you'll find a lot better resources here for matching. And so mostly if it's has to do with creating jobs when they come out, as the chairman pointed out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. I will tell you that I was not sitting around in my office going, I think I want to start flying. That until it was brought to us with the information that our locals had. It wasn't on the top of my brain, and it does help though when your community and when your industry says to you, this is what we need, and we do want to be responsive to that. So, but thank you for that suggestion.
Representative Blanton, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cindy, thank you all for a wonderful presentation. Always glad to see you. Cindy and I are Leadership Kentucky classmates.
That's
Best
right.
class ever in 2017.
Best class ever.
And you touched on this just briefly. You mentioned maintenance. So I know you're teaching flight hours, but are you also have a program dealing with aircraft mechanics and maintenance?
We have that program approved, and we are in the process of getting FAA approval. Is that the right word? Approval for that program. And one of the things is we needed the space, and we're at the point where we're waiting for that hangar to be completed because they want pictures. They want to see how we're going to do it in that space. And we're ready. We'll be ready to go with that. The program is approved. We're working on the FAA approval.
Okay.
And we want to see this. I mean, we may have some students also who say, I want to fly. And for some reason, it doesn't work for them. It could be a medical reason. It could be, and we see the mechanics option as a great place to say, here's another option for you, and still stay in the aviation world. And there's a huge need for aviation mechanics as well. So,
Well, am I wrong? I'm thinking, is there not a plant there that actually builds airplane engines?
GE
in Madisonville?
Aviation.
GE Aviation.
they're very interested.
So I would imagine that they would like to have that skill set coming out when they're hiring these people.
Yes, sir.
To know a little bit something at least about airplane engines. I
Yes,
don't
sir.
think a lot of people realize we've got a plant in Kentucky that builds airplane engines.
Yes.
And it's right there in Madisonville.
It's about, 4 miles,
Yeah.
4 or 5 miles from the airport.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Yates, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Been talking to the Aviation Caucus. There's a lot of talk about potential future of Kentucky as this being just a really big workforce improvement. We look at right now the economic impact of our investment with aviation, mostly because of we have FedEx of Northern Kentucky and UPS and all these other places, but also because we're a logistics hub, how we can build off of it. One thing that has worked, and one thing, but I like to look at lessons learned, best practices, but the P3s are huge. So whenever we put tax dollars into it, making sure that if there's a private partnership as well, that they need a ready workforce. We know that. These employers need these students out in order to invest back into it. So to me, I think as long as we know that those tax dollars are being recuperated based on that investment and making sure that we're retaining those graduates for these jobs. Thinking outside of it, a lot of times if you would have this significant investment maybe by the state. Obviously, we have federal matching funds that are available with this, and also local funds. But if it would be offset those tuition costs by the employers, the future employers, and so that way it wouldn't just be your tax dollars being spent; it would be recuperated by the industries that could make that advantage. And I think it's a huge win for Kentucky, though, because of the economic impact. So as we move forward, and I know that Representative Fleming has a bill coming forward as well that different schools and areas and airports may be able to apply for some of the some funding, so we can all kind of rise together. But to me, I think that if we have federal money available right now, we don't know when it's going to be. We need to be working to try to match it and bring it in. But I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
We appreciate your time. And honestly, I'm just happy to be putting our program out there, letting people know what we're doing in Madisonville, in Hopkins County, Muhlenberg County, and the counties we serve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can get your check on the way out the door.
I'll just sit right here. How's that?
All right. Next up is the budgetary needs of commercial service and general aviation. Have you folks please proceed to the desk. Just introduce yourselves for the record, and then you may proceed.
Hello, Jennifer Kirchner, Executive Director of Kentuckians for Better Transportation.
Emily Herron, Airport Manager at Madisonville Regional Airport.
Eric Frankel, the Airport Director in Lexington, Kentucky.
Just get this presentation up here and we will get started. Just a quick thank you again for allowing us to come today. We are here to just put a punctuation mark on Commissioner Carter's great thorough presentation that he came and delivered at your last meeting. He laid out some needs and opportunities, so we brought some experts with us today to go into a little bit more detail for you. Turn it over to Emily.
Good morning again. I'm Emily Herron. I'm the Airport Manager at Madisonville Regional Airport in Madisonville, Kentucky. I have been there for just over 3.5 years. We're a city-owned and operated airport. We also operate the fixed base operator, or the FBO. I started my role in Madisonville in March of 2020, which was a super interesting time to do a career change. But, since then, we have experienced a lot of growth. We currently have 31 based aircraft. We have a vibrant flight program through Madisonville Community College, which you all just heard from. And we just completed our first annual Wings Over Western Kentucky Air Show with almost 5,000 people in attendance. And we'll be hosting our third annual Beach Bash in the Bluegrass Fly-In this April, and expecting to host over 100 airplanes that will be coming in from all over the U.S. Much of this has been made possible because of the support and investment from our local government. So we're very thankful for that. I'll discuss our annual operations quantitatively here in a moment, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how our airport has been involved in the local community, from education to tourism and everything in between. And this is what general aviation airports do for our communities. There are many similarities between Madisonville and other general aviation airports in Kentucky, but we're also all unique in many ways. We have different strengths and different challenges. So out of the 58 total public use airports in Kentucky, 53 are general aviation airports. GA airports have a wide variety of uses, including business travel, education, and emergency response. They're a vital part of their respective communities. Madisonville is currently on track to end 2023 with about 15,000 operations, and a grant through the Kentucky Department of Aviation allowed us to get an operations tracker. We use the system called VerTower, and that has helped us tremendously in being able to capture the actual quantity and type of the aircraft that we have coming in and out of our airport on a daily basis. It captures takeoffs and landings at our airport using the aircraft's ADS-B output. And so now we have a little bit more accurate of a count of how many of the landings and takeoffs are being used for flight training, military purposes, recreation, and corporate and business traffic. According to the economic impact study that KDA completed in collaboration with the Kentucky Transportation Center, in 2022, Madisonville Regional Airport had $18.4 million of economic output, over $800,000 in state and local tax revenue, and we support over 100 jobs. Once phase 2 of the economic impact study, which is currently underway, is complete, the GA airports are projected to account for close to $2.5 billion of economic output for the state of Kentucky, which I think is a pretty big number for some small town airports. Typical needs for general aviation airports. the needs to maintain current infrastructure and support existing businesses and facilities are plenty in GA airports around the state. Over the next 5 years, GA airports across Kentucky will be looking to use over $122 million of state funds. A lot of that is for matching FAA grants and some for capital projects as well. Madisonville alone has over $2 million in state funding needs reflected on our airport capital improvement plan, which includes airfield drainage improvements, a new taxiway and apron seal coat, an apron expansion, and of course, new hangar development. Every GA airport in the state of Kentucky also has a waiting list for hangar development, so that's a need as well, along with maintaining our pavement, which is probably on the top of our list of needs. With the continued growth and demand of our airport, we could probably add to that number easily as we're looking to expand and not just maintain our facilities currently. And I will hand it over to Eric Frankel to speak on behalf of the commercial service airports.
Thank you, Emily, and thank all of you for your time today. We really appreciate this opportunity. Over the last my name is Eric Frankel. I'm the airport director in Lexington Bluegrass Airport. And over the last 18 months or so, I've had the opportunity to work with our general aviation colleagues around the state to try to develop a program that we could recommend to the legislature about how to best support both the general aviation and the commercial service airports. We both have, as Emily indicated, while there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences between these airports, and particularly between the commercial service airports and the general aviation airports. But both are important to the Commonwealth overall. So I want to talk just briefly about the commercial service airports. My guess is many of you already know quite a bit about the commercial service airports, but I want to talk to you a little bit about how they're distinguished a little bit. So again, as Emily indicated, there's 5 commercial service airports. 2, Paducah and Owensboro on the western part of the state, are considered EAS, or Essential Air Service airports. And what makes those different is that they have a passenger service from the airlines that's subsidized by the federal government. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Of course, in the central part of the state, you have Lexington Bluegrass Airport. And what it's somewhat unique to us between Owensboro and Paducah and Louisville and Northern Kentucky Airport is we're trying to be one airport for all these different entities. So, of course, we have a fair amount of commercial airline service, but we also have a lot of general aviation and corporate aviation service that not only serves Lexington, but central Kentucky in general. So we're trying to accommodate a lot of different interest groups at Bluegrass Airport. Of course, my colleagues to the north and to the west, Louisville and Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, those are significant airports and have significant impact on the Commonwealth, not only in passenger service, but certainly on the cargo operations as well. So they're certainly important to their communities, but I would suggest to you they're very important to the Commonwealth, and frankly have a significant impact on the world in terms of how cargo is transported through those airports. So what we wanted to talk about just briefly today is make those distinctions. Obviously, we support our general aviation colleagues out there too because they have these needs. Our needs are just different for lots of reasons, but we have them, and I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about why that is. In the case of Paducah and Owensboro, going back to the Essential Air Service program, those airports get a federal subsidy for air service that obviously brings passengers to and from those communities, obviously important to, I think, both those communities and the Commonwealth overall. That program right now is being reevaluated at the federal level, and it's likely that they may end up having to have right now it's 100% funded by the federal government. It's likely that that program may change and require a local share. And that would be very expensive for both Paducah and Owensboro to accommodate. And this is one of the reasons that we wanted to seek some support from the legislature as we move forward to try to accommodate those airports. If they have to try to fund that, there's going to be several $100,000s for each of those communities, in addition to their infrastructure needs that they're going to need help with. The 3 larger airports, Louisville, Lexington, and Northern Kentucky, we have some challenges, and a lot of folks would probably think that big airports have a lot of money, which flowing through, which we do, of course. but there are a lot of opportunities that we miss out because of things that we can't fund. And that is primarily trying to bring more federal dollars to the Commonwealth. So we have to come up with matching share. In the case of Louisville and Lexington, we have to come up with 10%. Northern Kentucky has to come up with 25% for matching dollars to try to bring funds into the Commonwealth. And to give you some sense of how much that is, at any given year between those three airports, we probably invest anywhere almost $200 million a year. Most of which is federal dollars that we can bring into the state, and we think obviously benefits the state. So that is one of the initiatives. The other one that's challenging for commercial service airports, and it's not well understood, and it's a little peculiar, but we cannot use our funds to do air service development, to add passenger service, either airlines or new routes. We're prohibited by the FAA from doing that. So what other states, and particularly surrounding states, have done is their states have engaged in trying to provide those incentives to fill the gap that we cannot fill. So right now, we're of course at a disadvantage because our surrounding states provide that benefit that our state currently does not. So that's one of those initiatives between coming up with that matching share to bring more dollars into our state, but also trying to have an air service incentive program, again, that will result in more dollars into our state. That's some of the support that we're looking for. From an economic impact perspective, I mean, we were obviously really blown away about the impact of general aviation airports in our state. The three commercial service airports, the largest three commercial service airports, have about an $18 billion annual economic impact and support about 130,000 jobs. And you combine that with our general aviation airports, and it's a $20 billion economic impact to our state through aviation. So we really feel like we have a good story to tell and is worthy of some investment by the state into our facilities. And we'd like to obviously encourage that. And finally, over the last 18 months when we've been working collaboratively together, we've also evaluated what other states, and particularly states that surround us, are doing to try to support aviation in their states, because we're competing with them to some degree, and particularly in Louisville and Northern Kentucky, where they're border cities. So those states right now provide incentives for air service and provide a support system probably greater than Kentucky currently does. And certainly Tennessee to our south is much more significant in terms of what their infrastructure investment that the state does for aviation. And there's other examples around the country. Won't go into detail, but just to let you know that we've spent a lot of time studying this effort. We're trying to come up with a responsible recommendation for the legislature to consider, that we know that we need to be held accountable to the state legislature in the future if you do decide to invest more in those facilities. So with that, I'll ask Jennifer to speak a little bit about specifically what we're asking for. But again, really appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you. Thank you both. I put this in here. I know it's a little small, but just to reiterate, and Commissioner Carter shared this as well as Emily and Eric did, about the long list of needs that are quite expensive at our general aviation and our commercial service airports. So I think that over the past year and a half, KBT has been working with KDA, the commercial airports, our partners at the Kentucky Aviation Association, commercial service, and we've done a lot of discussing, but also a lot of data collection and a lot of what works and what doesn't. And as Eric said, what are other states doing and what could we model after? So we think that right now, the bottom line is that the aviation industry in Kentucky is on fire, and it's the time to invest. And there's a multitude of ways that we can do that. So we're very open to working with the legislature on match programs. I know Representative Fleming has a very exciting proposal to address both workforce and capital needs. So we've really enjoyed getting to work with him as well. So what you have in front of you are some numbers that we're going to throw out there because they're based on the data we've collected. But know that we are engaged in the aviation conversation and open to working with you. So we're suggesting that there's $7.95 million for the general aviation airport support and $7.95 as well for the commercial service airport support. And that would be per year over the biennium. And an additional $15 million each year for infrastructure investment that you've heard these two talk about quite a bit as well. So with that, I will leave it there so we have some time for questions and comments. So thank you again.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Senator Mays Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here. I'm just curious. So on that second item, the 7.95, yes, for the general and commercial, is that primarily to use some of the match money for the federal dollars, and does that get us? What would that get us in the federal match?
So again, we typically, that would represent 10%. In the case of CVG, they have to come up with 25% match. So it varies, but obviously if we could draw, use that as a 10% and draw another, 80 million or 60 million or somewhere in that range, that goes a long way to help support the airports. And again, part of this is we want to have a discussion about having some flexibility for air service development with those funds too. But certainly we believe we can make a big impact with that 7.95 million.
And you said Tennessee, if I recall, puts in how much money per year?
About
from the
100,
state?
I think it was over 100 million now.
The state puts
The state
commitment
does,
in.
yes.
And surrounding communities like Indiana, similar?
Yeah, I wouldn't say as much. I think Tennessee is certainly leading the pack. I'd say Ohio and Indiana don't do as much. North Carolina is pretty significant. South Carolina is pretty significant. Georgia has a new program as well. And so it kind of depends where you go. But I think in some of those other states, again, they help with air service development, whereas something that we can't, as much as we would love to be able to help ourselves, we're just not able to do. So they step up in that regard as well.
And then would you all, how would you figure out who got what of the money?
Yeah, so we're having some conversations about that between the commercial service airports. Obviously, we're concerned about Paducah and Owensboro having enough to support their air service, and that's sort of the baseline that we're trying to work from. And then we've had some discussions with my colleagues about having some proportion based on the amount of passenger activity or something along that line that makes sense to everybody.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Emily, you talked a moment ago about the VER Tower. Is that something that the airport has recently added?
Yes, at Madisonville, we added it back towards the end of May.
Okay.
Prior to that, we were paper and pencil tracking our operations. Of course, our staff is only there from 8 to 5 right now, Sunday or Monday through Saturday. So we were losing a lot of operations that were happening both on the weekend or on, during the nighttime when we weren't there to capture it. We were also severely, I think, misjudging. You look out and you say, oh, that Cessna from the Madisonville Community College Flight Program, they've done, 10 operations, and really they'd probably done 20. So we are actually, from where we thought our operations were, we've tripled that. We were thinking we were right around 4,000 to 5,000 operations a year, and we're on track for 15,000. And I know that's across the state for every airport that has been able to use that grant to get that operations system. It's been a huge benefit for us because that also will help us capture more federal dollars based on us being able to accurately reflect our operations.
That's kind of what I was wanting to get at. See, because I know, and I just see someone from the Department of Aviation back there, and I'll get with you after the meeting. I want to see where we're at with across the state because of the grant that provided that, and I want to see what kind of increase we're seeing across the state.
Yes, I know. I think most of the other, especially the GA airports, I'm sure they're seeing it. With the commercial service as well, they do have a little bit more because of the control towers. A lot of us who don't have control towers have no way of capturing it. Right. But I think it's going to be an increase across the board for every airport in the state of Kentucky.
So we've missed out significantly on some federal money because.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Jennifer, you may pick your check up on the way out the door.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you all.
All right. Yeah, we're just handing out checks today.
Yeah.
They're the kind of like the governor's checks. They really don't have much on them. All right. Department of Revenue. Here's where the checks come from.
We haven't collected any money on this tax yet.
Please introduce yourselves for the record, and then you may proceed.
Yes, Good morning, and my name is Richard Dobson. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Sales and Excise Taxes within the Department of Revenue.
I'm Kim Hensley. I'm the Division Director for Miscellaneous Excise Tax, Department of Revenue.
We appreciate the invitation to be with you this morning, and we're here to talk about electronic vehicle power charging stations. And that's our topic, and this is a new tax that was actually House Bill 8 in 2022 when it was passed. The legislature passed this, and it goes into effect January of 2024. So we're right now in the process of working on the various infrastructure to be sure that this gets implemented in a timely manner. We've got a PowerPoint here we'll go through, but certainly entertain any questions that you might have as well in this regard. What I've done here on this slide is we've taken just an extract from the enactment under 138-477. So just to highlight some of the provisions, this is actually what was codified in regard to this new tax. As I said, it starts effective January 1, 2024. There are actually two rates. There's the base rate of 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and then there's also the surtax, which is also a 3 cent tax per kilowatt hour for the charging stations that are installed on state property. So on state property, you actually have two rates that are calculated on the operations. All of the revenue that is collected goes into the road fund. Then there's a provision here, just going through this quickly. If there is a charge for the charging station, then this excise tax has to be separately itemized and charged to the consumer. Now, we've had a lot of questions. What happens if there's no charge? Well, according to what was codified in statute, even if there's no charge, there's still that 3 cent per kilowatt hour fee. There is an exception to that if the stations were installed prior to July 1 of 2022. If there's no charge and they were installed before that date, then those charging stations and those operations are not subject to the tax. Who's supposed to pay the tax? Well, the fee has to be, itemized and passed on to the consumer, but it is the liability of the power station, the vehicle, as it says there, the electric vehicle power dealer. One other point here is that this is a monthly return, a monthly liability, so that the return has to be filed and paid on the 25th of each month.
All right, and I'll talk a little bit about where we are in implementation. Right now for the registration, they're going to be registering. Each of these charging station owners are going to be registering through the DRR's online portal. So it's going to be an online registration. We expect this to go live at December 1st, 2023. Dealers are going to have their FEIN to be able to register. And then the registration questions are general registration questions regarding business names, address, location, corporate officers, and tax account numbers. And then we are going to require some detailed information about the charging stations themselves, which is kind of outlined here. Basically, it's going to be the station name, the location, the EV network. That would be like if they're non-networked or if they're a Tesla charging station or a ChargePoint charging station. Whether they're separately metered, we want to know that. We want to know if they own it or lease it, whether it's a private or public, whether it's on state property, and then the number of chargers and at what level of charging. So level 2 and our level 3, and how many charging stations or charging ports they have at each location. The date that was installed, and whether if they were free charging stations or not. The tax return, we expect it's going to be electronically filed to you. We expect the electronic filing system to be up and running around February 1st, 2024. The tax return and payment are due monthly, as Richard said, on the 25th following the reporting month. The first filing will be February 25th, 2024. Like I said before, they have to be filed and paid electronically. There are going to be two sections. Section 1 is just the summary of the kilowatt hours that they're going to be paying tax on. The Section 2 is more detailed. There are going to be two schedules, and that's going to identify the number of kilowatt hours per charging station and whether, and the same for that state-owned property charging stations. And then the front of the return will have applicable penalties and interest, and it'll automatically calculate on that return. And there is a yearly adjustments that we'll be looking at, and then it's going to be adjusted by the change in the quarterly National Highway Construction Cost Index. They may not increase or decrease more than 5% annually and may not decrease below the initial base rate of 3 cents per kilowatt hour. We are to give the dealers notice at least 20 days in advance of the first day of each calendar year.
And those rate adjustments that Kim just went over, those are outlined in statute. So that is all. There's no regulatory administrative provisions that we've done on this yet. It's all specified specifically in statute. Another thing that's kind of come up, we've gotten various questions already, and this tax was enacted back in 2022. It doesn't go into effect until January of 24, and we have been based upon the various legislative activity involved in a lot of additional implementations within the Department of Revenue, new taxes and so forth. Another new tax that recently went online was the motor vehicle rental and power sharing and ride sharing rather, and that went into effect recently. We're on a similar track with implementing this new tax as we were on that one, and that one went in on a seamlessly really, and we're collecting over $3 million monthly now on the motor vehicle rental ride sharing tax. So we feel like we're in good shape on a timing standpoint in implementing this tax as well. What we have here on this slide and the next couple of slides, frequently asked questions, and this is based upon a lot of input we've already received. We've got this information already posted on our website, the questions coming in, and we've met with various utilities through the state. We've also met with some of the companies that are installing electric charging stations, trying to educate ourselves as well. So based upon that input and questions we've gotten from the public, and even from some members of the legislature, we've posted this information. So we'll highlight some of these answers. So does the tax apply where there's no charge? And we've already highlighted that. And according to statute, yes, the tax still applies, and it's due from the charging station operator, even if there's no charge to the public. And then who's responsible? It's the person that owns or leases the charging station. The interaction between taxes, if there is a charge for the station, then there has to be a separately itemized charge for this new excise tax. And that also brings up the issue of the interaction with sales tax versus this new excise tax. Well, when you're billing for charging the use of electricity, you're selling electricity. So that electricity is already subject to sales tax. So you have a 6% sales tax. But the 6% sales tax is not going to be applied to this 3 cent per kilowatt hour based upon the wording of the statutory provisions. So they're not pyramiding here or added to each other. They're separately itemized, if it's separately itemized. Federal governments versus local governments, state governments, if it's a federal government operation, they're really not going to collect the tax. So we've had that clarified. We can't force them to comply with state law. And so we also, at the end of this slide, have the caveat again that charging stations installed before July 1 of 2022 provided free of charge are not subject to the tax. The next slide, dealing with state and local governments, we've had this question a lot. Will the governmental entities be required to collect this tax and remit it to the state? And the answer is yes. Yes. There's no exemption provision. In fact, if it is installed on state property, you actually have an additional surtax, and that's how the law was enacted. What about private charging stations? The only charging stations that are being installed that are subject to tax are those that are open to the general public vehicular traffic. If it's a fleet, if it's designated private usage by it's a fleet owned and operated, and only vehicles for a particular company, even utilities, for example, or people are expanding to do electronic vehicles. Those charging stations are not subject to tax. It's only those that are open to the public. What about if they're a charging station that a particular business may install? Well, again, if it's open to the public, that business is still going to be liable for that tax. Sometimes you're going to have charging stations, and this is a focus trying to provide assistance to tenants of multifamily dwellings. Again, they may say that's what we were doing it for, this is how we've located them, but if it's open to the general public, then it's still going to be subject to tax. But if it's restricted in some way, then it wouldn't be. The last bullet point here, a question has come up. Some of the the charging stations are not equipped with metering necessary to track the kilowatt hour. So what do we do with those? The answer to that question, we've done some research, and of course the law requires the calculation of the tax based upon the kilowatt hours distributed. There are aftermarket meters that are available that can be installed, and it is the responsibility of the charging station owner to be sure that that it can be tracked. And sometimes we've talked with some of the utilities and their tariffs, some details there, but generally probably the best way to handle that is to be sure that there is a meter that is added to be able to calculate. We're willing to talk with the charging station owners. We know that on a case-by-case basis there may be some details that we can work out, or they can come up with some type of an estimate, but really what we're recommending is that there's actual metering that goes on, but we're not ruling out the possibility of talking with individuals on a case-by-case basis. We've already talked with a few, and ultimately that conversation usually ends with, well, we're going to go ahead and be sure it gets metered in that regard. So those are some of the questions we've had, and we'll of course take any questions that you have, and as we get additional questions, we'll add information to these PowerPoints as well.
We do have a website up. It's still a work in progress, but it gives some general information about the electric vehicle power excise tax. From this website, they'll be able to register. They'll be able to get to the electronic filing part and payment. And then there's contact information as well on our website if anyone has questions or anything regarding that. And there's our contact information.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I know this is going to be just a long process as we get this thing transitioned over. It's going to take a long time.
This is our first step. That's right.
We're
toe in the
taking
water.
baby steps right now.
Right.
Senator Yates.
Well, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It sounds like as you're talking to us and you keep saying that was what was required in the legislation, it sounds like we've got a whole lot of work to do to fix some things up. And so we were talking to my colleague, sometimes when we go to the legislative conferences, we look at best practices, and we think back how Kentucky continues to shoot ourselves in the foot. And we put a lot of red tape where we don't need to be, and most of the time with good intentions, but as we get to look back, we could figure out, as other states are incentivizing people to bring in, we want to make sure that we're not penalizing, because as a logistics hub, we're talking about the aviation and bringing in, we want to make sure people that are traveling these thoroughfares down 64, 71 thing, we want to make sure they're located. So when I hear that the way we wrote the legislation, we're literally going to tax ourselves, I think that maybe we got to do some tweaking. I know that a lot of the businesses, a lot of times when they'll put them in, they're setting up just on a 220 they're putting in, and it's mostly for their employees or people coming in, but they can charge there. I don't, to say that they would require, because if somebody from the public pulls up and puts it in there, they would have to get a separate meter. I can't imagine that would be real cheap, especially if you're just a mom and pop trying to just be a good service for that. And so I'm hoping maybe we can tweak that a little bit, but it sounds like when we're talking about 0.03, if we're talking about not a whole significant amount of money, it looks like about our oversight, our time, and going into it when we're getting into the mom and pops, these really small businesses, and we're saying, hey, you're responsible, you're going to have to put a meter, you're going to have this red tape. I'm hoping maybe we can find some way that the legislation can help alleviate some of that for the people, because what I really hope to do in the next 10 years to see us leading this, where we're located, we have such a great opportunity to be able to harness this. And as it's when we hear the people talking today about about FedEx and UPS and all the deliveries, and so when I hear the fleets are separate, that's great. We'll keep that separate. If I put it in my house, that's separate. If I own a parking lot, like I own a parking lot on there, if I want to put a meter up there for people who are parking in my parking lot, I could, as long as I had a little sign on there that said for people who are paid parking only, then it wouldn't be part of my cover. But if somebody from the general public used it, then would I be responsible? Would it go back to the intention of the owner? And then my other part is they're getting less and less expensive to put these 220 in onto it for the charging stations. They're getting, it's for people to buy them. I'm not sure if a business owner is going to purchase it, what is the cost of go back and putting a meter in on it separate? Do we know what that cost is, and that we're going to require them to do that?
Well, that is a good question, Senator Yates, and we just done a precursory review, like online, looking for different chargers, and we don't want to recommend. We're not really wanting to get into that business, but there's a wide range of costs. So as far as how much it would cost to put a charger in, but it's not an excessive amount
on the meter.
On the meter itself.
If it's going to be commercial, the house, it's about $2,000, $1,500 to get in. If you're going to do it commercial, it's about twice that. But then I'm wondering what the meter is. If the meter's another, so if I'm asking I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but a lot of my constituents, my mom and pop stores in there, for me to say, hey, can drop another $5,000, that they're not real happy about that. That's why.
Right. I guess one thing just to keep in mind, the Department of Energy has on their website, they give us the detail as far as how many charging stations are located in the state right now, and we're really on just the beginning of this deployment, obviously. So the vast majority of charging stations that are already located here, they're the level 2, which are these stations that take longer to charge, maybe an overnight to fully charge up the EV again. And most of those were installed prior to July 1, 2022.
So those would be not taxed.
Right, they wouldn't be taxed.
There's about 287 charging stations in Kentucky right now.
And so, what we're saying, and the information is going out now to the public, at least they'll have this information initially as they're getting installed. So hopefully it won't be something they have to do after the fact, but that they would be able to take this into account at the initial installation. But again, I just mentioned those statistics because this is the early stage, and there won't be too many of those impacted by this current legislation in the way it's worded today.
Just so our local governments that are putting those in right now, for to incentivize, we're going to that will be a tax coming in.
That is correct, and we've had some conversation with those local governments, and we've explained that metering, and they don't necessarily like the answer, but they are taking that that advice and moving forward accordingly.
Yeah, I think there's been 8 charging stations installed after that July 1st, 2022 date, level 2. So very, very few.
I think a lot of people have plans on moving that forward,
Yeah.
but we still have time before to maybe able to make some changes in this legislation.
Just a quick question. Do you all have any revenue estimates on what you think this may bring in?
Chairman Upchurch, no, sir, we do not.
Okay. It's a little too soon to tell, I guess. Okay. Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your all's presentation. As I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of this is to replace the gas tax. That is what we use for transportation and funding of roads and that. Is that correct?
Well, I think, I'm not sure we can answer the question of the purpose of it, but it does make sense in the sense that, the electronic vehicles are coming, and, those vehicles, by just the source of their power, they're not going to be paying for gasoline. So this is, I don't know if it's called a replacement, but this is supplementary, and I think, a lot of different states, Kim attends many of the our fellow state associations with FTA and so forth, and so a lot of states were grappling with the same issue. How do we ensure funding the road fund for our respective jurisdictions? And looking for supplementary or alternative, not necessarily replacement. And this is something that requires continual review and monitoring to see what is happening. So I guess that's all I can say at this point. I'm not sure if it's going to be a complete replacement, but we need to be sure and watch how, as electronic vehicles are adopted, the effect it does have on the baseline of our road fund.
Mr. Chairman, continue.
Yes.
So, but as I understand what you just testified to earlier, I'm just hoping that I'm on the same page with everybody. If I'm not, I won't correct it. All these institutions, businesses, whether it be one vehicle or 1,000 vehicles in a commercial group, are going to be able to create and put on their own electric charging stations, and they're not going to be subject to any tax. Is that what did I misunderstand that earlier? Say a car rental company can fix theirs own charging stations, and they're not going to be paying a tax?
Well, I think if someone buys a electric vehicle and then puts a charging station in his or her own home, then those charging stations aren't going to be subject to tax. So
that's not my question.
Oh, okay.
I understood you to say earlier that any business and organization set up their own stations, the vehicles that use those are not going to be paying the tax.
No, well, not exactly. No, sir, Senator Turner. If those charging stations are open to the public,
that's still not my question.
Okay.
If it's limited to that business's vehicles, and it could be 1,000 rental cars or 200 big trucks or whatever, limited to those, they're not going to be paying any tax.
That's right. If it is limited to their own usage for their own fleet vehicles, they are not subject to this tax.
So they're going to be able to run the roads. That's just what I'm trying to say. And they're not going to be paying no gasoline tax, and they're not going to be paying any tax on this electricity that they use.
Under current.
But every mom and pop and person individually that runs up and down the road, myself included, if I stop somewhere in charge, if I have an electric vehicle, I won't, will be charged a tax then.
If there is a charge for the use of the charging station, then the consumer will pay for the charging itself, and also the excise tax will be added. That's correct.
If I stop traveling down at this big place that they've got down here on the other side of Richmond and charge there, then I'm going to get hit with a regular tax and an excise tax if I'm a general public.
Yes, sir.
And that's going to be, is there any calculation of how many businesses that's going to be exempt and what that's going to do? Have you all done any analysis to try to figure out how much we're going to lose in tax in that way?
No, sir, not at this point. We're trying to get the tax up and running at this point, but no, we have not.
One other question.
One more.
Does the statute say that all these are exempt, or that you've just testified about, that we've given that right to all the businesses and big people? We exempted them but made the general public pay. Is that in the statute, or is that some administrative? I want that cleared up.
Right. Well, not in so many words in statute, but the language in the law, that is the effect. Yes, sir. It's based upon the way that the law was enacted.
Well, I have to ask that. So we enact the laws statutorily. Does the statute clearly state it, or is it administratively considered interpretation of the statute?
The statute clearly states this. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry for all the question, but
Sorry.
just need to get that straight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nice fishing expedition. We got there.
Got what I wanted.
Senator Yates, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be short. Again, thank you, and I know we're kind of, I think the underlying fund, we know that there's issues with the road funding, and we're going to have to figure a different way to be able to recuperate dollars to make sure that our roads are done right. And we all know that it's tough. It's a tough one, but I do want to make sure that we know that. I was listening to you talk about it. You are paying, obviously, with electricity, whether you're commercial, at home, or whatnot. When you use electricity to charge your vehicle, you are still paying a tax on that. There's no exemption. You're still paying the sales tax on that. So they are being taxed, correct?
Right. Electricity is taxable unless it's residential usage. That's correct.
Okay.
All right, the last question will be reserved for Senator and Co-Chair Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kim and Richard, thank you all. You made it sound very simple when you talk about it. I'm sure we've got a lot of work to do on this. And to Senator Turner and Senator Yates, questions. You know, we intentionally got out ahead of this, put the legislation in place because we knew we were going to have issues like this to come up, and as we start down the road with this, and it is a user fee. I know it says as excess tax. But we're charging a fee for every citizen of Kentucky that buys an electric vehicle. They're going to pay $120 a year, and that's based on about 28 vehicle driving 12,000 miles a year, getting about 28 miles to a gallon at a gas tax of 26 cents. That's basically what that was based on. And so, and the 3 cents was put in to try to capture those folks from out of state who pass through Kentucky, so they pay something to use our roads, and so that's kind of the thinking behind it. Now, there was no intention to charge residential customers, and Senator Turner, you bring up a good point. These commercial vehicles will have to figure out a way to make sure they pay their fair share on user fees, but we've got work to do on this, and I'm sure you'll see every year for the next several years, Richard will be sending you some changes to implement, because we had to look and see how this is going to work out, watch and see what our neighboring states are doing, and we'll get it right. But we had to have a starting place, right, and we have that. This is our starting place. So we have questions about, we have people talking about if a Kentucky resident has to pay to get their vehicle charged, can they get a rebate? We have questions about the free charging stations. Is it proper to charge them 3 cents a kilowatt hour? So there's a lot of questions still. We'll get to, legislation. We're always reactive, not proactive very often. So anyway, thank you all again for being here, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, I can't tell you to pick a check up on the way out the door. I think Monday was a big day for you all. Everybody's supposed to pay their taxes by the 5th or by the 16th of this month, so you should be receiving some. So I know mine's in the mail.
We're taking it to the bank now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I think that is the last on the agenda. Our next meeting, we have
November the 1st, like everybody else, or something, plus second or something.
November the 2nd. So, with motion for adjournment,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion.
we are now adjourned.
Oh, I really got to ask about that.
Yeah. I'm doing well. Pleasure to meet you in person.